Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm really glad you could join both of us today. I've got the pleasure of hosting Roger Lemaitre today. Roger is the president and CEO of Homeland Uranium. This is a new entrant to the uranium space. I say this in the sense that shares only started trading on the TSX Venture just last week. So, Roger, I'm glad to have you on. Thanks very much for joining.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's a great story. It's a new story for just about everyone. Just the fact that you started trading just recently. And just before we delve into everything, I do want to mention that over the course of this discussion, we will be making certain forward-looking statements. On top of that, anything you hear over the course of this discussion should not be misconstrued as financial advice in any way. Please conduct your own due diligence and come to your own conclusions your own way. Lastly, I will mention that Holdco Markets was involved in the most recent financing. Okay, so with that said, I want to jump right into this, right into the story. Just before we start, I know already a few of you are thinking that Roger's name, it rings a bell. I've heard of that name before. Roger was most recently the president and CEO of a company called UEX Corporation. So that probably already rings a few bells. Under Roger's leadership, the company doubled its resource base in the Athabasca Basin to 150 million pounds. Subsequently, the company was taken out in 2022 after a bit of a bidding war between Denison Mines and UBC. Anyway, we're switching gears. We're talking about Homeland Uranium. This is a US-focused uranium exploration company. Roger, just before, I know you were spending some time recently in Toronto. I know you spent some time at the PDAC convention. This is one of the largest mining conventions held annually in Toronto. In a backdrop of a lot of market volatility of late, you've been interacting with a lot of the investment community. What are just some of your brief takeaways from the convention, from the mood? How was sentiment? What do you think?
Oh, probably in all the years I've been to PDAC, this was probably the weirdest in terms of sentiment, or not sentiment, but sentiment. It's really crazy because I think there's a lot of optimism for companies and investors about where individuals are going to move on, or individual groups are going to move on to with their projects, and with especially in the critical mineral sector, but an awful lot of concern about financing, particularly for the Canadian companies, looking at how do we secure financing in a market that's been shrinking in terms of capital equity in Canadian markets. The mining issues are still a huge part of all that, but several companies definitely are struggling. I think there's some cautious optimism, but fear about what the current geopolitical situation looks like. If you'd asked people 2 months ago, they probably would have been, "Oh, this is exactly, things are starting to shape up the way we hope." But now the uncertainty is creating a lot of trepidation.
Yeah. Like I said, first off, congrats on the listing last week. Obviously, there's been a lot of volatility, but then again, I always say that within volatility, within chaos, there's a lot of opportunity as well. So you're back in the uranium game. You're switching from the Athabasca Basin to Colorado. Tell us a little bit about the assets, but also how did everything come together with your partners? What did you really like about the assets? Just give us a bit of a rundown.
Okay, so I'll try to wrap it up and go backwards on you there from the last question to the first. One of the things I wanted to get back in the uranium sector, one it's something I love dearly, and something, of course, I have some skills in, hopefully after being in this place for 24 years. I think there's a real separation in the uranium markets today between those companies that are sitting on resources and those that are not sitting on resources and hoping to find something new. So I really wanted to be in a company that had that opportunity to have resources, because I just think it's a better investment opportunity for your initial investors and those who come in later. So this particular opportunity sits on a pretty large historical resource, and I think that just creates a lot more investor interest than saying I have a piece of property somewhere that has potential, and they all have potential, but the risk profile is a little bit higher. Here, we're not looking at that same kind of risk profile. We're looking at can we convert something that was known about into the same kind of resource we expect under current standards. And I think that's an extreme challenge, but one, quite frankly, that I can look at show to our investors that if we do current, we should be able to see some value increase compared to our peer companies.
Right.
So how we got into the space, I was connected with the vendor of this particular project and asked to help them find a home and some financing for it. So we managed to go using sort of my contacts in the industry. We were able to put together a deal with Valley View Resources. Valley View asked me to stay on based on my experience to help move the project forward. And it all came from there. I'll give the vendors substantial credit. They did some excellent research to find a property, the Coyote Basin in particular, that had historical discovery of significant size, but it's historical resources. So you take that, be cautious about historical resources to a degree, but the potential to move forward is pretty. To this 43-101 standard today is pretty. It's a relatively easy process by comparison to how to find something new. I didn't believe it up front because the uranium space in the U.S. had already started to move. The vendors picked up this property for staking just this past summer, and with my experience in the uranium space, and I'm not the U.S. expert. I'm also not ignorant of what happens in the U.S. in terms of uranium space. But I would have thought I would have heard of this. But it's amazing how sometimes these properties in the U.S. can fall through the cracks of sort of knowledge. The vendors did some research, found some old SEC filings, and actually determined this property was open for staking. And they were able to pick it up and were able to do this deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the one thing that really stood out that I noticed firsthand was, just within the Four Corners region where you're operating, I haven't seen a deposit, hitting 35 million pounds, and that's very rare. Granted, it's a historic deposit, but that's a really good starting point. And you just don't see that.
No, and that's why it was fairly hard to believe up front, because when you go, I haven't heard of this, and then you do the research and subsequently being able to purchase the data set. So we're pretty comfortable where we're at, that there's a significant resource here that we just have to execute our program to get to that resource stage a year from now. And that'll be a substantial benefit to our shareholders. And creates, I think there's also opportunities to grow, not just along strike and down dip, but within the strict package of these four mineralized horizons. There seems to be indications there's stuff in between.
Mm-hmm. And Roger, what's just a little bit of the history of Coyote Basin?
Yeah.
How many holes have been drilled? What entities put them down? And what's the latest in terms of the historic resource? I know Energy Metals was involved at one point. Mm-hmm. Give us a bit of a rundown there.
So the property was found, or the discovery was made by Western Mining in 1979. They were working in the area. Western Mining was a well-known company that was very successful in the exploration business all over the world. 79 was an interesting time in Colorado. Back in 1978, they published a series of a book on all the radioactive occurrences in the entire state. So if you're today looking out there saying, "Hey, where is this thing?" or "Ever heard of it?" you go looking in that sort of Bible of radioactiveness across Colorado, you won't find it because it was discovered shortly after. But only a couple of years after this discovery was made, the uranium industry, particularly in the U.S., collapsed with under 3 Mile Island and the incident around 3 Mile Island. So this property was all mostly on federal land. It was allowed to lapse, and it sat through that incredibly prolonged period of uranium downturn from the mid-'80s to almost the mid-2000s. In the mid-2000s, Energy Fuels and Bill Sheriff acquired this property for staking. They didn't do a whole lot of work. They did some conceptual ideas and studies. Did a little bit of work, but not a lot of drilling. Back in '79, Western Mining did 24 holes. They hit intersect mineralization on 21 of those holes, but they're widely spaced and probably a little more erratically spaced than we would like to see by today's 43-101 standards. So that creates an opportunity for us. Energy Fuels, when they picked up the property, had a large list of these things. It was lower on their priority list because they had production assets that are now in UEC and are operating. And uranium one was sold to the Russians, or sorry, Energy Fuels got sold to uranium one to the Russians, and the property was allowed to lapse again.
Energy Metals.
So the vendors actually caught wind of this project by looking at old SEC filings, and they picked up one of these Energy Metal ones and looked through it and went, here's a property I've not heard of. It's got a significant resource. Where is it? And then they looked out and saw it was open for staking. And so unless you were doing that kind of the research and looking at historical stuff through the SEC filings, you probably wouldn't have picked this up because the data is private, sitting in hands. It's not something you can just research up and find. You have to know do a lot of digging to figure that out. And it took us a couple months after the transaction was signed. We were comfortable with the research we were able to do that we had the right land, because there's public websites to help you figure that out. But we really wanted the data, and since we picked up the data shortly after the transaction was announced, we were able to concur that that's exactly what happened, and that we have exactly the data. We know exactly where to go.
Mm-hmm. And I guess we're targeting the summertime for a large-scale confirmation drill program. Could you just quantify the size of the program? Because this is going to be pretty massive.
Yeah, we got a phase 1A and 1B program. The 1B program's the real value driver. We're looking at a 50-hole, 10,000 meter program. Mineralization at Coyote Basin starts pretty much right at surface. It's been defined down to a depth of around 200 meters. It dips very shallowly. We think it's a potential open pit target with 4 different horizons. We will target those 4 horizons in the open pit sort of depth range first before we expand in the down dip direction. We'll probably defer expansion to the north or to the south along strike to focus on the footprint of the known areas of mineralization first. Try to convert that into an inferred resource here that we'd hope will be ready for the market in about this time next year. Concurrent with that, we'll look at doing some preliminary metallurgical work to see if we can look at a different way of processing this.
Roger, in terms of, obviously once the resource has been proven out, what are the extraction possibilities? Like, is this seen as a conventional project? Is this ISR? Are there other possibilities? How are you seeing things?
Yeah, I don't see this. The data we picked up, I don't see this as an ISR project. This is more of a carbonaceous trash style deposit we see in the Colorado Plateau. But because it's very, very shallow, I see it as an open pit potential versus an underground mining scenario. The overburden would be substantially less than maybe some of the peer projects in the neighborhood. Being large enough, I think we can set up a heap in terms of total resource potential. I think we can set up a heap leach scenario that would allow us to, instead of transporting raw ore to one of the conventional mills, which are reasonably just good distance away, we can move. Doing heap leach with an ion exchange recovery would allow us to ship resins substantially cheaper if we had to ship them at all, if we couldn't process them on site ourselves. But that is something that we'll be looking at doing the preliminary engineering work on this year during that first exploration program. And it won't be the definitive answer, but it'll be the first step amongst a handful to get to that definitive answer.
Okay. And I also noticed, like, just in terms of strategic location, you are located relatively close to a number of the uranium, conventional uranium mills. I guess most notably White Mesa.
Yeah. No, we're kind of in the middle of all 3 of them. If you put a triangle and said, where's the middle of the triangle between the 3 of them, we're kind of right in the middle of that.
Yeah, very good. And very close, I also noticed very close to the Coyote Basin and Redwash properties, which are very close to each other. There was an historic mining going on from a mine called the Maybell mine.
Yeah.
How similar to that? I know it's still, we're still just starting out, but in terms of geologic characteristics, are there some similarities at all with Maybell?
We believe so. They are in a slightly different part of the stratigraphy, slightly higher up than we are, but the style of deposit is from the past that we know about is really similar. And the ability, it's relatively flat-lying, carbonaceous trash style deposit that is open-ended. And there's a company up there, an Australian company called Global Uranium Enrichment that started doing some work up there last year and some drilling and is seeing success. but similar style deposit right nearby.
Oh, very good. Okay. So in terms of time frame, we've got that drilling campaign ideally starting, I guess, towards the end of summer.
Yeah, I think mid August is about appropriate.
Okay,
for our start time.
and we should expect, knock on wood, an updated resource estimate sometime in early 2026.
Yeah, I believe so. Holes here are very shallow, so to do 50 holes won't take an incredible long period of time. The good news is we can use downhole probing to help us with grades in situ, and therefore cut down the time cost that a lot of companies have with those long assay periods that we take, or especially when things are busy in the industry, that takes a while to get months to get those assay results. We'll be able to see things in almost real time.
Very good. Okay. Yeah, no, we're going to look forward to that. Roger, I just want to wrap things up, but one other thing that really stood out for me when I was looking at the company was you've really managed to surround yourself with a really accomplished board. And I say this because you've got some really key people that range from capital markets to operations to geology. And it's the type of board that you don't normally see in any, still junior company. So I think that's something else that really puts you, lets you stand out from the rest. And it was something, that I definitely latched onto.
I appreciate that. I was ecstatic with a little help from our capital markets friends that helped us with the financing. They introduced us to our board members. I mean, Eugene McBurney is a legend in the capital market space on the Toronto exchanges. He's a chairman of our board, brings a incredible wealth of experience and knowledge to the space, as does Mark Christensen, who's been around doing this forever. Ross McElroy, that just sold Vision Energy, is now on our board as well. Andrew Tunks is maybe not as well known in North American markets, but extraordinarily well known in the Australian markets, being involved with ACAP and with the rare earth element projects out there right now. And then, Rob Shuchuk with Karis Capital, very good capital market experience, very good at understanding how to put the company's nose out there. With Paul Matisek on the advisory board, and then he worked with Paul as well, that Rob did for years, and their experience in the uranium sector, particularly in the last cycle. This is a board you wouldn't see for in a company that would be probably several hundreds of millions of dollars market cap, not something that's just starting out. And it gives us a lot of comfort that that they like our story, and they wouldn't be involved if they didn't.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I love the fact that it's a new story. It's a new entrant that you just started trading recently, and it's a good story. And little by little, people will it will get onto the radars of other people. So yeah, we have a good sense of the timeline. Roger, you'll definitely have to come back. When there's some concrete results come, little by little as they come in. I'm assuming I must have been one of your first interviews post listing.
Yes, definitely the very first one.
Awesome. Okay. Well, Roger, listen, congrats again on the listing. And we'll do this again, in due course when needed. And just wish you the best of luck, and you're off to a great start.
Well, thank you very much, and we look forward to keeping you and your subscribers up to date on what we're doing.
Thanks, Roger. Take care.
Okay, take care.